The United States is known for spending a lot of money on our elections. If you're in Pennsylvania, you probably see a Trump ad every 10 minutes. But there's one country that outpaces the US in election spending, and that's India. Narendra Modi, in the past Indian election, has spent billions of rupees plastering his face on billboards, television ads, and even rice bags. That's right. He, as the president, is able to actually put his face on food aid given to everyday Indians. So, given that the US is a superpower, their high election spending might indicate that they'll become one as well. And in fact, Tony Blair made that comparison to The Independent on January 1st of this year, predicting that India will become the next global superpower within this century. But there are some problems. China has had a lot of economic growth, a young population, and a lot of opportunity. So many are wondering if India can replicate that success. So considering that the last time China came out of poverty, 800 million people followed. And also, that if India replicates that success, they would also change the international order. It's a matter of global significance that we consider the question. Will India become a global superpower in the 21st century? The answer is likely not, because they're not on track to fulfill China's economic prosperity. More specifically, first, because their economic growth is slowing down. Second, because their government is corrupt. And last, because India doesn't have international influence. Now, a while back, I heard this rap song called "No Money, No Problems," but in India's case, it seems to be the opposite. Their economic growth is slowing down. That's the first reason why India will not become a global superpower in the 21st century. It's because their economy simply isn't growing as fast as it needs to. As the Center for Strategic and International Studies writes on May 1st of 2024, a key part of China's growth was because they were an economic superpower before they were a global superpower. China was able to produce products cheaper and relatively better than any other country because of its vast, relatively educated labor force, meaning that China had a distinct advantage in this area. But unfortunately, India doesn't seem to have that, because as the Economic Times writes on just February 2nd of this year, India's economic growth is slowing down. Their GDP growth every year is at 6.4% now, which sounds high until you realize that that's the lowest it's been in the past 4 years. That's because India has not replicated the same success that China has had with technology. Sure, Narendra Modi is trying to make more investments, but only if those succeed will India be able to become a global superpower. And currently, that's not happening. But second, one Indian government official once said that a way to get rid of corruption was to just remove all the penalties. He got a lot of backlash for that. But that exemplifies the second reason India won't become a global superpower. And that's because their government is relatively ineffective and corrupt. Although India is a democracy, they have many problems that other countries don't. And it's not about whether a country is a democracy or not. China definitely isn't. It's about how effective the government is at getting things done and how low the corruption is. The Economist elaborates on June 2nd of last year that China is actually surprisingly liberal when it comes to income redistribution. That's because they can often increase economic demand, which helps the economy evolve. Furthermore, the Chinese government has spent only a few decades developing the best high-speed rail system in the world, something that no other country has replicated. But in India, that's not at all happening. As the International Affairs Journal published in their May 2024 edition, India is currently suffering from this problem. They don't have the same high-speed rail that China has been able to develop, and their government is also quite corrupt. In fact, one Indian says that essentially India has stopped caring about corruption. Because the government is so full of useless, wasteful spending and redistribution that doesn't actually do anything, it seems like India might be stuck in a rut where they're not going to be moving forward, which is what they would need in order to become the next global superpower. But finally, I once saw a little clip of a movie where an African guy was asking a US soldier to bring democracy to Africa. Now the US refused until they heard about the oil. That leads us to the third and final reason why India won't become a global superpower. It's because they don't have the necessary international influence like the US does, where it's able to bring democracy everywhere it goes. But more specifically, let's make a comparison to China. At the Atlantic Council, on June 2nd of last year, China has a key part of its economic strategy and international influence rooted in the Belt and Road Initiative, where they give some countries in Africa, as well as the entire world, money to build port and trade infrastructure. In fact, about 180 out of the 192 countries are a part of the BRI. That really shows how influential China is in this regard. But furthermore, China can actually use this to leverage votes in the UN. On issues such as Taiwan, many small African countries will actually vote with China against Taiwanese independence simply because they're so dependent on China. But unfortunately, India isn't close to replicating that success, because as the New York Times wrote in December of last year, India has significantly less influence on the international stage. While they do punch above their weight currently, they're nowhere close to the level of influence that China has. Currently, they're both friends with the United States, but also buying oil from China. India is avoiding antagonizing any specific country, but also barely pulling any weight on their own. They're not able to control vast amounts of territory, like China with the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea, or the United States in the entire world. So that's the third reason why India won't become a global superpower in the 21st century. So it's when considering that 1.4 billion Indians might be impacted by this change. We return to today's question. Will India become a global superpower in the 21st century? The answer is likely not, because they're not on track to fulfill China's success. More specifically, first, because of a slowdown in economic growth. Second, because of a corrupt and ineffective government. And lastly, because they simply don't have enough global influence. So the next time you see a world leader on a bag of rice, just know that it might not be a good sign. Thank you.
You're at 7:13.
Yeah, thank you. I should be within the grace period?
Yep, within the grace period.